Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum. We're here with Shawn Taylor of C2C Journal discussing Canada's trade relationships and the drive towards self-sufficiency versus basically economic productivity and wellness. Peter, want to turn back to, we had a little bit of a taste of a discussion about how this self-sufficiency debate got restarted, I suppose, when we had all of those shortages at the beginning of COVID when it came to personal protective equipment, or PPE. And you made the point that that's not the whole of our trading relationships, nor should it be. But that's also a good example. That's the example the politicians are using when you've got Doug Ford and others saying, look, we've got to stand on our own 2 feet when it comes to PPE. So how does that argument sort of fit into your context of Canada being a trading nation?
Well, sure. A lot of people, and politicians in particular, have seized on the fact that we had these shortages of masks and gowns and ventilators. We'll use masks because that's sort of easy to conceive of. So we had these shortages in March and April, and everyone said, well, this is a reason why we got to make all these things at home. But the fact, and this is somehow an indictment of global supply chains. You shouldn't be relying on foreign suppliers for masks because you'll be caught out eventually if there's a big rush. But the fact is that the demand for masks in particular went up like 400 to 600%. And even if we had been self-sufficient in masks in January of 2020, we still would have run out because no domestic supplier would have been able to keep pace with the huge demand in masks that followed when the pandemic hit. So whether we source those masks from foreign suppliers or domestic suppliers, we would have run out. So just the fact that there was a shortage is not an indictment of global trade. And since then, I mean, they're back in the stores, right? I mean, masks are everywhere. We'll probably have a surplus of masks now. And what are the governments doing? Well, they're handing out tens of millions of dollars to manufacturers to build factories so that we have even more masks in the future. In the story, I talked about the $46 million for one 3M Canada mask plant.
Yeah, in Brockville, Ontario. That's right. Yeah.
Yes, in Brockville. So we are going to be very well supplied in masks. We are going to be oversupplied in masks, and the taxpayers are going to be paying for it. And it's not clear to me that this is necessary, because even if that plant had been around, we would have run out. So what's the best insurance policy? I think it's being able to buy from as many different suppliers as possible. So I'm not convinced that the mask example proves that we can't rely on global supply chains, although lots of politicians are seizing on it as evidence that is the case.
Let's talk a little bit. I think you mentioned that if all OECD, that's Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, kind of the club of rich countries, I guess is one way to put it. What if all OECD countries rely less on international trade? What are the knockdown impacts of that?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned quickly at the beginning, they did an economic modeling exercise. What happens if you see more domestic subsidies of the kind for the mask plant, more sort of executive orders like when Trump said, the American supplied vaccine has to supply American patients. I see more of that kind of stuff. Then they projected over a 5-year period, global GDP among these countries would fall 5%. I mean, the actual number doesn't really matter that much. What matters to me was the fact that Canada showed the worst performance of all, because we're so heavily trade dependent. They projected our GDP to fall 13%, which was significantly more than Australia, which was I think 9%, and the U.S., which was 7%. So you can always quibble with economic models, but what the OECD showed was that more protectionism is bad. and it's worst for Canada among all countries. So that's why I think we have to be very concerned about where these trends are going and whether we're aiding these trends or whether we're pushing back against them.
We'll continue our discussion with Shawn Taylor of C2C Journal as we discuss Canada's place as a trading nation. Stay with us for our final segment.